So, welcome to this Fireside chat with the CPO. Obviously, I'm not CPO. I am co-founder CEO at Sievo, the procurement office company. But it's my great pleasure to have Natasha Gurevich here with me. Natasha is CEO, co-founder at Candor Procurement, but before that has a long experience in procurement leadership positions across different companies and industries, most lately as a CPO at Nike. It's also my great pleasure to announce that Natasha has lately joined Sievo Advisory Board. So thank you and welcome also in that capacity, Natasha.
Thank you very much for welcoming me to Sievo family and inviting me to be part of Sievo France. And it was really insightful to join the board and have the first discussion earlier this week.
Great to hear that, Natasha. And I'll let you, Natasha, introduce yourself shortly. But I also want to make a couple, let's say, practical notes. So this is a pre-recorded setting. So there's unfortunately no way you to ask questions at this point, but you will be listening to our discussion here. And also we are soon releasing a State of Spend 25 report, which is basically based on Sievo community data. So we've gone through 2% of global GDP that we see every year, and we created a report with industry-specific benchmarks on number of procurement metrics. And that's super exciting from our point of view, and we'll discuss a bit of the benchmarking also with Natasha later on. But Natasha, you've been 26 years in procurement. Tell me your story. What is the story?
The procurement journey, as I'm among those people that fell into procurement. That was not conscious choice. I spent first 27 years of my life in Soviet Union, Russia. And when I moved to the States, procurement just happened to me. So my first job, I was a temporary employee at the Gap. My first job was to ordering business cards for the company. And that was the highest level automation at that time, when you could enter information for your business cards, not in a form writing it down, but actually in a system. And that was the highest level of automation that existed 26 years ago. Apparently, I did a very good job. My core function, core responsibility was comparing invoices to purchase orders. So, and I remember a joy with which I ran to the office of my director and I said, Carla, I identified $13 discrepancy. And I felt that it's a very big deal.
Say this from the day one.
Exactly. And during the course of the month, I probably identified discrepancies worth $1,000. Believe me, even 26 years of dollars for a $16 billion corporation did not mean much, but it meant to me. And they saw the enthusiasm with which I was proclaiming all of that. And they extended me a position of a buyer. So I look at my procurement career as that proverbial mailroom clerk. I've started bringing the letters and finished as the CEO. So in my field, there is no way to go after CPO. So I started at the Gap as a buyer and I paid my dues through all the records.
Okay. And after Gap, which company did you work?
So I had very short journey at Visa International, but the year was 2005, and this is when eBay acquired PayPal, and they brought me on board to build procurement organization at PayPal, which was absolutely phenomenal journey. Online payments in 2005 was such a new thing, and fascinated the people who I worked with, the caliber of thinking, the creativity, and eBay itself was novelty, right? And online auctions. It was phenomenal. Great journey, amazing learnings. I went onto consulting side a little bit, but more on the BPO. I was building programs after that for the company called Procurement, which is now part of Accenture, and then IBM. And then one of my former bosses, the person who I happened to work for 4 times in my life, he called me back and he said, MG, pack your bags. We are going. Like, where we go now? And he said, we're going to transform procurement at McKesson. And this is how I went back in house. McKesson is one of the largest companies in the world at that time, was $200 billion in revenue medical supply distributor. And after that, I joined Salesforce as vice president of forcing to drive transformation there, and Nike after that. So That's somehow 25 years just flew by.
You've seen it all, and from different perspectives, different things, and different roles.
And different level of maturity of organizations. What's interesting was move from McKesson, which is 200 billion in revenue, 1.86% margin.
Yeah, very thin margins.
Very, very thin margin, which and connect, what is it? Less than 4 billion in revenue. And then moving to Salesforce that had 11 billion in revenue and the same 4 billion margin. And I'm like, wow, this will be very different environment, because when you operating in the business with very low margin, any efficiency, any idea for productivity is bring it on, make it happen. When you are in a cash-rich company, the benefit and the value from procurement is completely different.
Yeah, and that's my question here. How is the role of the procurement different from very thin margin versus, let's say, high margin businesses?
So in thin margin, they help us generate any fuel for the growth, right? Because the companies continue growing and you have to support multiple geographies. And actually, during my time at McKesson, they acquired the companies in Germany, which, because before that, McKesson was dominantly focusing on the US market. And you generating value, looking at every part of supply chain and trying to find even minuscule efficiency. Because if you can save a quarter of a penny, but on that step, it will generate enormous benefits for the company and will allow it to grow. You go to cash-rich, high-margin company, you are focusing more on the value differently. Compliance is one of them. Having the right suppliers kicking in fast is another one. Helping company to be creative and improve speed to market. Because during my time there, Salesforce decided to sponsor 2024 Olympic Games. We're talking about conversation we had in 2021 when it was confidential. Of course, now it's public. And my team was trying to figure out how we're going to generate the contracts with different providers, because Salesforce has always been good as business to business. And now we're becoming business to consumer. And how's that going to work? And different Olympic committee, broadcasting companies, how we're going to bring that. So yes, this is where procurement people employ their creativity. Yeah. Their kind of like either inbuilt ability or developed ability to step out from what you know and really start critically thinking about something you've never dealt with before, but you have to figure out how to make solution to the company.
Amazing. Now, in your 25, 26 years in procurement, what has changed most? And also, has procurement finally moved from transactional to strategic? What's your view?
I think for very many years, we didn't. I am very excited to see that we're moving now. And frankly, the technological development is forcing us to move there. And now I used to have privilege of learning one company deep, right? Deep and wide. But I didn't have as much visibility to other businesses other than staying in close contact with my peers across many other industries and learning their companies from in an anecdotal way. But now, as I'm serving multiple customers, I can see significant distance and the gap between procurement readiness and technological readiness. Technology is marching super fast, much, much faster than procurement people following. And it doesn't even matter on the level of maturity of the company. It matters the maturity of procurement organization and how well it was invested into before, how much it was in the center of supply chain or budgeting or planning and processing. So in many instances, procurement functions had been underrepresented in businesses. And now technological development is forcing us to get smarter, because I think at this point it's pretty clear to every procurement professional that tactical activities, transactional activities, repetitive tasks, they will very soon be automated and you will not need people to handle that. So the leader of procurement, and frankly, everyone who is in the field, have to make this realization and start kind of challenging also on embracing technology much faster. A lot of technological development is happening on the side, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's well integrated into procurement minds yet.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. And also, I've been in software business for 20 years, and I've never such the speed of advancement that as we are now seeing with the AI and LLMs and agentic AI and so forth. But I think there's really kind of what the fundamental models can do now is much ahead what software products can do, which is again ahead of what procurement organizations, large enterprises are willing to absorb. So I also believe that in the next few years, the procurement organizations and large enterprises that can absorb the innovation quickest will have an advantage. Yeah.
And it will allow us to go back to what this function is about. Procurement is about procuring, helping businesses to acquire goods and services in the fastest way possible at the most reasonable price, not lowest, the most reasonable price possible, from the suppliers who are compliant, who are able to scale with the business when needed, and who are top innovators in their field. It doesn't mean giving business to the companies we know. And it doesn't mean doing business with the companies that we're comfortable with.
Yeah.
So the role of procurement is actually being that matchmaker between the needs of the business and the availability that exists on the market. It's actually being a matchmaker between supply and demand, but the lack of automation of the past and the lack of strategic thinking and frankly, being bombarded with transactional operational activities that always take precedent and always take priority. Procurement, unfortunately, did not have much opportunity to really become that matchmaker because it takes time to understand business objectives and business direction, trajectory, and to understand what's happening in supply market. And to be that good matchmaker, you need to know both sides. So I am very hopeful and excited about what future is bringing us because I'm hopeful that procurement will be able to free up time by not focusing on transactional, repetitive operation issues and become that conduit of knowledge and the nectar of two sides of the market.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think sort of the way I also see is software plays two roles. Indeed, automating what can be automated transactional routine, and also to your point, connecting the supply market and connecting the business needs. I think there's a role that software and also data, and also our community data, of course, can play is to bring more information, more automated way. So instead of, let's say, going to conferences or Googling or discussing in the networks, software data sets can help you to identify new and alternative suppliers.
And this is what I was thinking about in the last 2 days at CEO France by looking at the insights, right? And all data points that you collect. Oh my God, you can create so many products out of it.
Yeah.
Like one of the areas that very few companies, even the most advanced companies do well, the proactive and ongoing risk management of supplier base. Yeah. Hopefully some companies, hopefully we like most of the companies do at least the first step, evaluating credit worthiness and commercial ability of the providers they bring on board in the beginning, but then that supply can stay with you for years and years and years. And do you ever do ongoing checks?
Yeah. So let me ask about that because, of course, there's much more uncertainty in the world nowadays in many ways. There's geopolitical events, there's natural disasters, there's anything that happens in the commercial environment and so forth. In your current role as an advisor through Candor Procurement, how would you see the companies, let's say, coping with all of that uncertainty? That was a prank answer, yes.
I think Andrea brought up the point in his presentation saying that learning the history, COVID was such a blessing in disguise to tell the businesses that things happen and things happen periodically. But in reality now, looking back like 26 years, every 5 years something.
Yeah. And people have, let's say, got used to the, let's say, false safety that the supply is assured, that you can focus on other stuff, but then indeed it's how it showed that supply.
But you remember like the year 2002, right? Like Enron collapse, how stock market collapse, like Arthur Andersen's writing papers, like Big Five becoming Big Four. I mean, it's
And just 2009 again.
and then 2008 housing market collapse, which created things like then 2015. Then we had 2020 for COVID. Now we have tariffs in 2025, and everyone is surprised. Why?
Learn history.
I mean, it always repeats itself. You just have to be prepared. You always have to be vigilant. And every year that I'm staying in procurement, I'm having deeper and deeper appreciation for this field. Yeah. And that's the reason I didn't go back to a corporate job, though I had options, because I wanted to multiply and kind of like spread the knowledge that I accumulated over the years about procurement and say, we can do better as procurement professionals and we can make greater difference if we have the right tools and if we positioned right. And I view my purpose as to amplify the voice of procurement leaders and just spread the goodness of that. We see the market, we know how to analyze it, we can help propel things forward. Let's just always be vigilant, aware, and mindful of the environment we are in.
Absolutely. Now, a shameless plug here, sort of, we are also seeing in our community data that the companies are investing more in the said risk management. If you look at the category of financial task and risk management and how much large enterprises spend on that, that spend doubled between 22 and 24. Does that surprise you?
It did. Actually, when I saw this number yesterday, it did surprise me. I wonder if the fact that the economy is growing a lot. So a company is also looking for greater way of driving efficiency or reducing operational cost, and maybe the headcount is going down and reliance on the third parties is going up. But I think that it puts even more responsibility on the third party to provide very specific guidance and help companies to map out their future direction.
Okay, makes sense. Hey, let's move a bit forward. And in your, let's say, days of the CPO at the Nike, you increased the spend under management from 10 to 15 billion, quadrupled sales in just a few years. What external benchmarking or external data sets did you do to actually achieve that?
The first, not speaking specifically about Nike, but when procurement leader joins a new organization, they assess the level of maturity. And if maturity is low, whether it's from tools perspective or frequency of revisiting key agreements or like maybe inflated supplier base, then the first push is easy because you're just bringing it closer to kind of baseline, right? And I would say when you elevate level of maturity a little bit, the reliance on benchmarks are very, very high. And I think that also, and shameless plug, and I'm doing it very consciously, is that what excites me in the last 2 days is that the tools like yours and the information you accumulate can be such a driving factor, enabling procurement leaders to make the right decisions fast.
Yeah.
Whether it's related to the cost, whether it's related to supplier composition, whether it's related to the risk, to any market dynamic, indexing, pricing, the geographic expansion, which regions are coming up with new technologies, it's priceless. And I think this will what helps procurement become really strategic. So reliance on data is heavy. I also would like to say that reliance on a network, because very often I could not. There was some instances when we just could not find market.
Yeah.
And
Then you go,
I had to rely on my network and calling 5 CPOs and saying, hey, are you using this particular tool for supply chain forecast in this particular region? And I'd say, yeah. I'm like, tell me how it works.
Yeah. Okay. What is the data point that you never had access to that you would love to have at your hands?
I would say that ongoing risk management of supplier composition.
Okay.
And we have one instance very often when procurement leaders think about who do we evaluate from the risk perspective, the spend is the driving factor.
Yeah.
It's an important factor, but it's not a single factor because there's some suppliers that will fall below that threshold, but they deliver teeny tiny function that nobody need even be
Freeway is huge. Yeah.
that is a core for your services. And that I think that any procurement leader, if they can get like on a weekly basis, this is where your supplier composition stands. This is where they stand from commercial stability, from the risk, from any legal actions that they're participating in, from their contribution to any objectives that are important to your company.
Yeah. Now, the core of any procurement function pretty much is at least in most settings, is cost reduction and driving cost reductions. And of course, especially if you look at kind of service heavy area, it's easier for direct materials where you have prices and so on. But if you look at, let's say, service heavy areas where the kind of the definitions are not so clear, if you don't perhaps have the price and volume data available at scale in the same ways, how do you go about, let's say, setting the baseline, setting the savings targets, and how can you use external market data in such categories?
So small correction to your first statement that savings is the most quantifiable measurement of procurement success, but that's not the main one.
No.
When it comes to the areas where immediate baseline is hard to establish, I would say knowledge of the market is the most important part that procurement professionals can have. I am known among my teammates as anti-RFPer. I don't believe in RFPing everything.
This is interesting.
So I know that many RFPs have a right to exist, and it remains to be the right tool to get to the right pricing and choose the right provider. But I believe that if category leads would spend their time studying the market, knowing who's playing on the market, what the cost of services should, how technology elevates services that this service provider can deliver, whether it's consulting company, risk management, taxes, legal, anything that falls in the category of services. And the same goes to marketing. Right? There are many very well-established agencies. They do amazing job. But there are many agencies that are popping up with very maybe niche, but such a deep subject expertise that for companies that have marketing as, let's say, the key from their brand promotion, maybe they need to work with that. But you need to allocate time to study a field, to study the category. Now going back to the premise that removal of low value, low EA, but heavy volume transaction activities will free out professionals and give them opportunity to spend time on really studying the market. So because you technically, if you're categorically for marketing, you should know what the costs should be without going to 6 months RFP.
You mentioned the savings is not the most relevant metric, but it's most quantifiable, but not the most important one. Then what is the most important metric per goal?
I think it depends on the company. I've spoken recently with some of my peers, and even for $20 billion corporations, they probably would have $3-4 billion in indirect spend. They would not have savings target. Growth in spend under management is a very important factor. And growing spend under management doesn't mean that everything is handled by procurement. It means that the procurement created systematic environment and function that discourage stakeholders and users bypass procurement processes. So growing spend under management means that all spend across the company is funneling through one channel, that there are no hobby buyers, that there are no shadow procurement organizations, that everyone follows the same process, goes through the same systems, that all POs are issued in a unified format, that legal has opportunities to look at all contracts, procurement has chance to contribute to high value, high risk contracts. But like this absence of merit spend and growth of spend under management in a compliant way, that's one of the factors. Compliance and quick elimination of all audit issues, reduced risk and supplier base. I think these are very, very important factors. And my prediction is that they will get more important going forward.
Okay.
At least I hope so.
Well, I agree. It's my second last question. You're on the Sievo Advisory Board now. What are the things that most excite you about Sievo?
Well, first of all, thank you for welcoming me to Helsinki and introducing to your office, and to something that you've built over the last 22 years.
Yep.
First, I am very impressed. I'm very impressed because, and now as a business founder myself, compliment you for, I know you had tough times since beginning. I've asked you and you shared about it. You persevered. And as a person, I admire it. As a professional, I'm very impressed. And you becoming my North Star from that perspective, that walking through your office and looking at just how many desks are here and knowing that you also have Chicago and Bucharest community, just the fact of creating opportunity for 400 people to provide bread for their families. Thank you for that on behalf of the community. And that's impressive to me. Seeing the product and seeing how you are growing, how many things you've developed in the last number of years is also very impressive. Actually, I think it would be beneficial to share how I learned about CPO.
Hey, but please go ahead.
So we were looking to create technological solutions for Nike. And my team has been extremely skeptical about everything what was coming their way. They didn't like this because it was not flexible enough. They didn't like this because it was too expensive. They didn't like that because it was too rigid, too clunky, too long to implement, and all of that. And when they saw Sievo product, they called me and they said, you have to see. And I'm like, that's the first for like the 2 years. So the team is saying, you have to see it. If they said I had to see it, and I really had to see it. And so I think that speaks to the fact that you got the attention, right? You got the attention of the product. What I've seen in the last 2 visits here of forensic sites, you and I had a conversation about tackling potentially looking at tracking realized savings. That is a knot that is super difficult to crack, but I think it's something that the team is excited to work on. So hopefully something will be come out of it. I was really excited about Sievo IQ, Sievo Assistant, right? So that is some like new features that I did develop in, and I like the functionality and not simplicity, but convenience that will be to procurement readers. I am super psyched about all those 2% that you collect and all the insights, because I think if you massage it and wrap it in the right way, you will simplify the life of permanent people. You will elevate their ability to provide impact to their organization, and that impact will have massive trickle down effect just on effectiveness and efficiency for the organization. They will be able to create so much, they'll be able to free up so much capital by being efficient, and that it's just the company's growth, the business growth will be inevitable.
No, thanks for that, and I appreciate a lot. Actually, still 2 more questions. The second last now, I think yesterday we were speaking at the Sievo Friends about the transformation, and you've been leading a lot of, let's say, procurement transformation. Sort of, as we all know, transformation is not easy. It's hard. Change is hard. What would be your 1, 2, 3 advice on any procurement leaders listening here about embarking transformation journey?
It's hard to fit it into 3 seconds. So it took me 30 minutes yesterday. And
So this is still very...
And I think we barely scratched the surface. I'd say probably first one is be very intentional.
No.
Be very, very clear why you're doing that. Make sure that it's not your ego or just your vision. Oh, I have a vision, I have to make it happen. Make sure that it's relevant for the organization. So be intentional, be very mindful about how to bring on board different parties that have different priorities and different perspectives. The transformation you envision will create a lot of disruption. And your role as a transformative leader is to predict and to understand where disruption will be coming from, and in a very empathetic way, work with people to explain. It will get messy. It will get disappointing at some point. We will not get what we need. You will not get what we want. And we will not even get what we will promise. But it's beneficial for business. It's beneficial for the company. It will eventually benefit our consumers. And I think connecting this vision, like your why, with a company why, with consumers why, is very important. But the reason we call it balancing act of transformation, because the balance is in driving forward business progression. You drive it with people, through people, and by people, and how to bring them on board to support that change, knowing that it makes them so freakishly uncomfortable. right? So be empathetic, but be firm.
Yeah. And let me share personal experience because when we were smaller at Sievo, I was like, oh, this change management transformation, what is this? This bullshit, basically. And now that as we started to grow, I started to realize that managing change, driving transformation, even at our small scale, 400 people, starts to be a challenge. And it's a skill that people need to have to kind of make the change. I can only imagine what it is in 20,000 people organization or something like that. Now, my last question, we work in some of the, could say, quite exciting contexts and companies. Can you share a favorite project or favorite anecdote that you can involve?
Great project. Well, I love the transformation we drove at Nike. It was inspiring. It gave me an opportunity to bring everything I learned in the year prior, and it gave me an opportunity to elevate the people that were working in the team and to show them, just open the doors and work on kind of more exciting stuff. Because when you're driving transformation, a lot of different things opening up. But there was an amazing project at the Gap many years in the beginning of my career when Old Navy redesigned the Hikers and they moved from one model to another. At first, the thought was, let's pilot it. And then they decided to go full-blown scale and produce like enough new design, new style called garment on hangers for all 800 stores that I think Old Navy had at that time. And we somehow ended up with an inventory of 25 million old hangers. And my boss asked me to figure out what to do with those. And he said, of course, nothing can go to landfill. And of course, you have no budget to ship it around the world. So you figure out what to do with 25 million hangers. That was
What happened? What happened?
well, that would be for another gift. I have to also mention another project that, if you know, Salesforce is very heavy on mascots. It's part of company identity. There are goats, there are Astro, there's Cody the bear, I think. Blaudi is the name of the goat, if I'm not mistaken. And now we have Einstein.
Yeah.
So, and at some point we had to negotiate the cost of having the right of using Einstein face and voice. So it's kind of like, how do you negotiate intellectual property for the voice and image of the dead celebrity? Yeah. Right. So that's why I love procuring, because you can move from, hey, can you please negotiate the cost of the vending machines while stores, to, hey, we're buying another corporate jet. Can you figure out the lease? Or during the COVID time, when before COVID, the cost of ocean container shipping stuff from China to LA was in container during COVID was 24,000, 724,000. How do you negotiate?
Yeah.
So bringing it down to 14,000 was a massive victory because you secured capacity. And that's kind of like what procurement is about, that you thrown into new thing every day, all the time, and you have to figure out how to solve it. That's why intellectual curiosity, problem solving is so relevant. That makes me super confident that no AI will take procurement jobs, that are focusing truly on procuring creatively and smart and in a right way for each particular organization. And I'm very excited about the future and how you and all your products can support as procurement professionals.
Let's end on that high note. So thank you, Natasha, not only for this session, but actually joining our advisory board as well. Very much valued and appreciated. For the listeners, thank you and have a nice rest of the day.
Thank you.